There Michael stood 15 years, looking at the wall, but not at the wall, beyond the wall, waiting, patiently waiting, inhumanly patient.
Halloween, the night he came home.
Hey guys, Everyday Aficionados here, Shawn,
Miguel.
with our first review in Spooktoberthon 2014. Tonight we're taking a look at Halloween from 1978. It's directed by John Carpenter, and it's starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasence. Everyone knows this movie. It plays every Halloween, and of course it's that horror classic slasher type movie. So let's get into this one.
I was surprised. It was a lot more grounded than I expected. It felt like more of a psycho-ish type of story, where it's trying to be a convincing serial murder story. Surprisingly, there isn't that much gore either. I thought there would be more of a supernatural element, but there really wasn't. Everything in the movie is still within the realm of plausibility.
This one to me was really all about atmosphere, that really sort of dark, mysterious tone. You don't really know what's going on or why, other than Dr. Loomis trying to explain it to you, and just Michael Myers as this sort of really mysterious being. You know, he's always sort of in the background, or far away shots of him. They really sort of make you feel like he's just always around. It makes you feel really on edge, like you don't know where he's gonna pop up next, whether it's gonna be, behind this bush or in that corner. I just always find myself sort of looking for him in the background. You feel like you never know where he's gonna be lurking.
And it's surprising how it's able to maintain that tone, even though the setting is relatively mundane, just a suburban street. And a big portion of the movie takes place during the daytime, which isn't what you'd expect from a movie that's about murdering and Halloween. But it manages to pull off daytime scenes with just as much tension and eeriness as the nighttime scenes in the movie, which is really impressive.
Another thing that I really liked about it is sort of that low-budget feel. The mask that they used in this movie was just a William Shatner mask that they painted white. I've heard stories of how after every take they'd have to rake up the fake leaves that they used to reuse them again in the next shot or the next day. But yeah, I really love that sort of low-budget, sort of grainy 70s feel that it has too. And of course, I can't talk about this movie without talking about that great score from John Carpenter. Even if you haven't seen Halloween, you know that music, you know those riffs. To me, it almost had a sort of Jaws-like effect. You hear that music, you know he's around, and you're sort of looking for him, wondering where he's gonna come out from. It really helped build that tension. Another thing that really stood out to me for this film was the cinematography, and more specifically just those POV shots. They're really creepy, and it sort of puts you behind the mask, so to speak. It makes you feel like you're in the head of this character, and it sort of makes you feel kind of awkward, because it forces you to have this voyeur role of watching these characters do things that you feel like you shouldn't be watching.
It's also really claustrophobic, which is a really important visual theme in the movie. It's always pitch black whenever you're inside of a building. You can barely see what's going on. You can't tell if Michael Myers is literally right behind a character. But the voyeuristic POV shots are also really interesting, because there's this really weird sexual undercurrent and tension throughout most of the film that seems to be one of its controlling themes. Almost every murder occurs either before, after, or during an act of sex. So you get this sense that there is a sexual element to the murders. To me, I thought Michael had a distorted sense of sexuality. He didn't know how to express his own sexuality, so when he sees other people expressing it, he thinks it's gross and evil and disgusting, and the way he acts out on it is by killing them. So he murders those people who are expressing their sexuality.
To me, I had a little bit different take on it. He goes and acts out these murders, and the way I saw it was almost like that was his sort of sexual release. You can see that in like the part where he kills the guy with the knife and he stabs him into the wall and he's stuck there and he's sort of like, tilts his head, admires his work. There's these sort of like sexual tones to these kills. A lot of them are sort of like asphyxiation, and you can, hear these like breathy moans from these girls as he's killing them. And it's really sort of awkward too at the same time.
It never gives you enough details to try to piece it together and figure out why exactly he's doing this. What is it about sexuality or the sexual aspect of these murders that's really being explored here? Of course, there is the dynamic of a man having power over these women and that being a destructive influence. But the strongest character in the film is a woman, and she ends up being the one who's able to stop Michael. Of course, Donald Pleasence saves her, but it really is, I think, to her credit that Michael Myers is stopped at the end of the night.
All the other characters that get killed, are these teenagers in high school who are sort of doing all these things that they shouldn't be doing. The sort of like innocent virgin girl who doesn't want to participate in all these things and sort of gets made fun of by these people who are participating in these things. She ends up being the one that lives. The movie definitely makes a point to put that in your face.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird, though. I have a hard time believing that the movie is moralizing because it does not seem like a moral movie. And Michael doesn't seem like he has morals either. He does all of the murders in a way that's very impulsive. There isn't one single reason for all of this, or at least that you can tell from watching this first movie. Another negative point for me is that a lot of the kills feel kind of cheesy. For example, the strangulation with the telephone wire. In my opinion, it's just the weakest kill of the bunch, just because of how ridiculous the scene was. And just the way the scenes are acted out, the flopping around, and making all of these ridiculous noises. It breaks the grounded atmosphere that the film established in the beginning. Another thing that was really successful, though, was using that suburban setting. A suburban setting is something you would assume to be idyllic or peaceful. But there are a lot of cool little details that make the suburbs feel really sinister and kind of claustrophobic. Everyone seems to be in their own little house, all contained where anything can happen to you, and there's no one around to help you or save you because they're all contained too. Or they're not even willing to help you. There's a scene where Laurie is screaming and being chased by Michael Myers, and she runs up to this house and bangs on the door. She's obviously injured, and she screams for help, and the people turn on their light, and then they just close the blinds on her, like they don't care about her problems. They don't want to deal with her problems because they're safe in their home, so why bother? So you get a sense that there's no escape. The suburbs are almost a prison. And you're basically being left to die because no one is willing to help you.
And to kind of go along with the claustrophobia and like those point of view shots that we were talking about, whenever you're sort of in that point of view shot, you always have this sort of like constant heavy breathing that you can sort of like hear him breathing behind the mask. And it's just really creepy. Even at the end, when he doesn't die and he's not in the ground anymore, you don't know where he went. You just hear that breathing and you're just on the edge of your seat like, where is he? He could be anywhere.
And the end of the movie makes that explicitly clear. It shows you every different area of the house, and that breathing is always there. He could literally be anywhere in the house, anywhere in the neighborhood. He's just waiting.
So another thing that I really have to talk about in this movie is the performances of Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis is really good at that sort of like innocent, book-smart character. She completely contrasts the other dumb characters that are around her that are just like, totally, books are yucky. To me, that was actually a weakness of the film. I can't really tell if they're trying to make fun of those types of people or if it's literally just kind of weak writing on the part of those characters. Maybe they're just there to be killed off and you want to see them get killed. But that was a weak spot. I really didn't like some of those characters. And Donald Pleasence, who's really great as sort of the Van Helsing to Michael Myers. He's constantly, running around and trying to chase after him and rambling on about how evil he is. You can almost get this feel that he's just as crazy as Michael Myers. Almost like he's the only person who really understands what's going through his head. And one last thing that I just want to touch on is just the neat little references that John Carpenter makes to other films. The Thing from Another World is always playing on the TV in the background. The kids are watching it. I thought that was really cool. And of course, you know, he does the remake to that movie. The whole movie itself is really a tribute to Psycho. And even Dr. Loomis, Sam Loomis, that's the character from Psycho. And, you know, Janet Leigh's daughter is Jamie Lee Curtis. You can definitely tell that John Carpenter is a fan of classic sort of horror science fiction movies.
It really captures that creepy atmosphere of Halloween really well. It was a really solid little horror movie, but as with every John Carpenter film, it went beyond just being that. And the more you think about it, the more rewarding really the movie becomes, because you get to delve into all these little ambiguities, all these little aspects of American culture, misogyny, domestic abuse, the culture of the suburbs that it seemed like Carpenter was really interested in exploring. And you know, for me, that's exactly what I want out of a movie. Although I really love this movie, though, I do feel like it fell a little bit short of being a great film.
I think this movie's far from perfect, but when it comes to, you know, horror films, especially ones from, you know, like the 70s, that era, this is definitely one of the better ones. It really kicked off the whole boom of slasher films. To me, it's just one of those films that gets better with repeated viewings. It's a classic horror movie, and it perfectly sets the atmosphere for October and Halloween for me. It's definitely one that I think anyone who has any sort of interest in horror movies at all has to see. So, the Everyday Aficionados overall rating for Halloween is going to be 3.5 William Shatner masks out of 5. What do you guys think of this movie? Do you think it could have done anything better? If so, what? What are some of your favorite 70s horror movies? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to tune in next time when we will be reviewing Night of the Living Dead.
And remember, whether it's liqueurs, movies, games, or beer,
if you're looking for reviews, you can get them right here.
That's the Everyday Aficionados, signing off.